So as I'm sure you know as a Terraria connoisseur that there are a lot of different pirate-themed things within the game of Terraria. That includes a pirate invasion, pirate vanity sets, a couple of, I guess, cool pirate-related weapons. I've also even made a few pirate-related builds here on the channel, one for the actual pirate NPC, which is of course also in the game, and even one for the very, I guess, iconic anime of One Piece, which you can see either of those videos already on the channel here. But one thing that is definitely missing is a more pirate-appropriate base, and that's kind of what I tried to make today. Hey Terraria fans, welcome back to another speed build video. Guys, in this one I'm going to be making a skull cove that is basically meant to be a sort of hiding place or base of operations for some pirates. I didn't go crazy with the actual home or I guess livable part necessarily. I really did focus on the cove itself and the landscaping, and I really like the way that this thing turned out. But if you're not really sure what that's going to look like, it basically means a large, well, skull head and a little bit of ambient background. It's really not that crazy, but it did take me a lot of effort, so I'm hoping that it's something that you guys enjoy. Oh, and by the way, if you do ever consider making a build like this, oh my god, please, for the love of god, look up what a skull looks like from the side, because this thing took me forever. Anyways, moving along, guys, there are a couple of housekeeping items to bring up as always, which is, of course, you can catch me building any of these builds live on Twitch or on YouTube, because we are multicasting now, which is awesome. So if you want to catch me either on a Tuesday or a Thursday at about 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, please feel free to pop in. We've been having a lot of fun, and it's been a pretty enjoyable experience to get your guys' feedback and I guess opinions on the designs. Additionally, if you're enjoying any of the content here on the channel, guys, please feel free to hit the like and the subscribe or any other of those buttons down there, because it definitely helps out the channel. We're trying to grow slowly, and hopefully this will get the videos out to a couple of other people that are maybe interested in Terraria builds. And lastly but not leastly, guys, do stay around until the end of this video, because I will be covering all of the materials should you choose to want to make something similar. So I'll explain a little bit where I'm using them, that kind of thing, and I guess maybe why I'm using them. So again, if you want to build a replica or maybe kind of make something similar, well, you'll have all of the materials that you'll need to do so. Right, so with all that said, guys, let's get to the build, shall we? All right, guys, so I am still testing this mode of, I guess, presenting the content here, where I'm going to do a bit of a voiceover and just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing as I'm building. Now, I won't obviously speak throughout the entire thing, but basically I'm going to explain a little bit what's going on and what I'm thinking. So here I'm actually building the skull, as you can see. This thing was a pain in the ass. It was really hard for some reason. I did even have a reference picture in front of me, and I still struggled. Now, I am using a variant of a Luminate block just to get this kind of initial shape looking. It did take me some time to get the mandible and the skull, but particularly the bridge of the nose was really annoying. So if you do decide to do something like this, for the love of god, please look up a reference picture and just do better than I did. This thing probably took me a couple of hours just on its own. I kept refreshing it and kept trying it, and for the teeth I decided to use a mix of stone, some slab, as well as some sandstone. So it all comes out pretty good in the end, but again, this bridge of the nose here that you're seeing is going to be probably the hardest part for me. This was about proportions and shaping. The eye socket itself wasn't too bad. Once I got the mandible in place, that also helped as well. A skull like this is about proportions, like I was saying, so definitely it's something worth taking your time. Any case, guys, for the eyeball, I am using some craggy stone in the background here. Again, you'll see I'm using this Luminite variant. I believe this is the Mercury one. I'm just kind of, well, look at a picture and make a nose. So for the teeth, like I said, we use some sandstone, some slab, and I think I ended up adding a bit of gold as well. Finally, you don't actually see it at the moment, but I do eventually get to the point where I build the spinal column. Now, this is just using some bone platforms. I decided to kind of add this in because I thought the mandible and the teeth and the head just sitting there without any structural support looked a little bit strange. So I did add those bone platforms later, and I believe some sandstone wall also painted white or gray in the background, and I added a bit of texture and kind of went from there. So again, the skull, guys, is not too big of a deal once you actually get the shape right. Once you get the shape right being the key thing. So I do hope that this gives you a pretty good idea of how I put the skull together. Now I'm going to be quiet for a little bit. You guys can listen to some of the music, continue to watch the build, and then I'll chime in again when we get to a little bit more of an interesting part, probably around when we're doing the landscaping. Okay, so I might have lied. I'm actually going to chime in here for the house. Now you can see there's a lot going on. The idea was to have an abandoned house that was sitting over top of the skull, and you kind of had to do a bit of an obstacle course to actually get to this thing. So I used some spooky wood. I actually used some copper plating as well as some palladium. A couple of the unique blocks here are going to be some of the tungsten brick and the silver brick, which I never really use. Also went with some windows on the side and kept kind of playing around with the shapes and the designs. Nothing too crazy, we just activated them. And then for the roof, we tried to go with a little bit of a different look, using some platforms, using some dynasty shingles, and well, just kind of playing around again with the design. So nothing too insane here for the house. I think this is something that's pretty comfortable for me, unlike the actual skull, but we try to make it fairly interesting. We eventually even added in some wallpaper all over just to make it look a little bit more tattered. I don't know if I really achieved that look necessarily, but again, the idea of the kind of obstacle course or climbing up to get to this place or to get down to the Skull Cove, let's say, was sort of the idea. Kind of an overkill maybe, or of an addition, but I do like this sort of feel. You know, we have a map, we have a couple of details that really make this thing stand out. But of course, you don't actually have to build something like this. You could build a little shack if you want. You could just do some landscaping. You could do nothing. It's completely up to you. It's one of the benefits of building in Terraria. Now, when it comes to the landscaping, guys, it is pretty important to add this in my opinion. So I went with this kind of overhanging waterfall type feature. I thought it'd be a good addition here because I was going to add some fog machines at the end just to give it more of that ambience and some of that background feel. Landscaping, again, is not something you always have to do, but I do think it's something that really helps your design. So here I basically just went with a lot of craggy stone to sort of set the shape, added some dirt blocks to figure out where I was going to roughly put in these little additional pieces that gave this build a little bit more depth. And then I just went around with some stone, some hellstone, and I think some mudstone brick, and just kind of added everything in where I liked. I added some trees, some water, and then really just allowed the wall design to take shape. There's no real rhyme or reason to this. I did want to add some additional features, of course, using our wand for some leaves. I then added a tree or two, and yeah, I decided to paint these trees a different color as well. But again, the idea here is just to add some, I guess, background, some landscaping, something to make this feel a little bit more alive. So again, strongly encourage people to actually attempt to do some of this stuff. It's not necessary, and it does take a little bit of extra effort, but your final product is going to look a lot more interesting, a lot more alive, and just feel like it's more part of the world. And for a build like this where I don't have a whole lot else going on, in my opinion, it's good to add these little bit of details and features. So again, water feature is the primary issue here. Adding some stone, adding some trees is of course nice. You don't have to make custom trees, but as you add the foliage, this thing really comes to life. And again, you'll see I'm adding this foliage all across the design just to help bring everything to life. Now, the last thing I did here, guys, was I added or expanded our little treasure room. Nothing too crazy, probably could have made it a lot bigger and a lot more intricate, but I just want to dig this out a bit more, keep it like it was behind a waterfall, and just have a little bit of treasure, a bit of, you know, interest in the back side of this waterfall that was kind of like a hidden stash of sorts. And again, I think it looks fairly good, but again, maybe it could be a little bit bigger. All that was left after that was to add some fog machines, and we're basically done. All right, so with our Skull Cove build now complete, guys, let's go ahead and take a quick look at all of the materials that I actually used to put this whole thing together. Now, as always, guys, I do encourage you to pause the video here if you're wanting to take a closer look. There's quite a number of different materials and quite a few that I don't typically use, but I'll cover those here in a second. So for now, if you just want a quick snapshot of all of the materials, well, you can kind of see everything right here. Now, the first place to start here is with the blocks, because there are a variety of different blocks that I think are very different. Now, starting with mercury brick. Now, this is simply a luminite variant. I use this for the skull, although I did try a couple of other materials, although you may not have seen that during the build process. We tried a few. This is the one that I stuck with, and I believe I painted it a gray or white, and it looks pretty good, I think. It's not something I use all the time, but a block that I'm starting to get a little bit more familiar with. Now, in a similar vein of blocks I don't typically use, I definitely used a bit of silver brick as well as some tungsten brick. Now, these aren't super noticeable per se, but they are just in the actual frame of the house. I just wanted something a little bit different to the design. It's not something I typically use, and again, something that you can see here and there. Now, another block that I don't typically use is going to be some gold ore. That is just for some of the teeth. I thought it was appropriate for a sort of Pirate Cove. It's a little bit shiny, so, you know, kind of works out. Now, the rest of the build is pretty standard stuff. We got some palladium, we got some stone accent slab, we got some glass, we got some mudstone, we got some spooky wood. You know, I think a lot of different woods here like ashwood and ebonwood go well together in a design like this, but ultimately nothing too crazy. So the blocks themselves are not all that unique. A lot of stone elements to make this thing stand out a bit, and I think it for the most part worked out pretty well. Now, moving on from the blocks, we're going to quickly cover all of the actual walls, and there's nothing too special. Again, we did use some sandstone wall here and there. I don't use that very often, but the one that probably stands out the most is actually some Christmas tree wallpaper, which of course you can see where that is. Now, again, something that I'm trying to play a bit more with is the different variety of walls, things I don't typically use, and then experimenting with different paint. Now, beyond the Christmas tree wallpaper, there's also some copper plating, some boreal wood, some spooky wood, some glass, and some gray brick wall. Nothing too crazy. We did also use two different fences with ebonwood fence and some rich mahogany fence, which again you'll see here and there throughout the design. Nothing too crazy, and we just want to keep it nice and simple. And in that same theme of simple, the paints are pretty much the same. The exception, of course, is going to be your negative paint, which I'm hoping that you can tell where that is. Beyond that, we have some sky blue paint, some brown paint, some black paint, and some white and gray paint, which I use all throughout the build. I think using some of our sky blue paint, or sorry, I should say deep sky blue paint for the trees is something that I liked here, a different effect. I was initially going to go with just kind of your green and standard look, but something other than green at times can look kind of nice, and something I encourage you to try out in your future designs. But yeah, that's a really quick overview of all of the materials, guys. So that said, let's get on with the rest of the video. Alright guys, so there you go. There is our Skull Cove done. I'm actually really happy with the way this turned out, despite the difficulties with that bloody skull. I don't know why it gave me so much trouble. I'm sure someone else probably could have come up with that design or that shape really quickly. It just gave me some trouble, and I don't know. It was tough, but worth it. I think that's probably the best way to put it. But overall, guys, I am, again, happy with the design. I absolutely love the way it feels. Adding those fog machines and all that landscaping really makes this build pop. I think you probably could have done a little more with the actual treasure chest and the cave. That area just needed a little bit more work in my opinion, but I was running out of time. Additionally, the house on the top, while it's interesting, feels, I guess, a little out of place. Maybe we could have done something a little bit more worn down, or maybe something more interesting and more pirate feeling. I just feel like it's kind of just a house on the mountain, so it doesn't quite fit the theme as much as I might have liked, but that's something I could always change down the road. Overall, I hope this gives you some inspiration for your next build, guys, or a design that you've been thinking about, and hopefully, if nothing else, it'll give you something to try to copy or replicate, because it's a really kind of interesting design, especially when you work in this sort of skull and landscaping piece. I think that has a lot of potential for different builds, maybe something in the underworld or something in the sky that's meant to be like an entrance to a large dungeon. Point is, you can use this for pretty much anything that you like. But all that said, guys, as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you like? What would you change? And maybe, I don't know, a build that you'd like to see in the future. Additionally, guys, I'm also curious to know what you guys think of this kind of new format where I'm actually talking during the build. I'm not really super familiar with it or comfortable with it necessarily, but I hope it gives a little bit more insight to what I'm doing, maybe improves engagement a little bit, and I don't know, maybe it helps you guys out a little bit with understanding what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But yeah, with all that said, guys, thank you so much for watching until the end of this video, and as always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.